Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Get Cooked. I'm Sarah Cook, and each week I have the pleasure of talking to members from our wider rowing community and hearing some of their insights and information and history about our sport. And tonight I am truly honoured to be talking to an absolute legend of not only Australian rowing but Australian sport. It's President of the Australian Olympic Committee and International Olympic Committee Vice President, John Coates. John, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure, Sarah.
Now, I want to start with where we're at right now, and we've had a great question from one of our viewers, and he's asked, what are your thoughts on the importance and position of the Olympic Games and Olympic spirit to act as a global beacon of hope, a globally unifying moment in history in a post-pandemic world? So what position will the Games play next year?
Well, whoever asked the questions obviously seen some of the messaging that we've prepared between the Tokyo Organising Committee and the IOC, and that's exactly it. We and the Japanese government and the Tokyo Municipal Government, the Organising Committee, the IOC, we all see this, the successful delivery of the Games, the postponed Games, as striving for that's the light at the end of the tunnel, and when we achieve it, that will be the celebration of mankind over this virus.
Absolutely, and I know that we're all counting down the days now, and I've seen a lot of posts. Many of our athletes and support staff would have been over in Tokyo now and preparing for those games to start. So another 12 months away, but I'm sure we're all very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, we once the decision was taken to postpone, a lot of work's been obviously done. It's probably the most complex thing I've been involved in. But we are just planning. I don't know if you want me to go into what's involved in the postponed Games, or you want to come to that later. It's up to you, Sarah.
Well, let's get into it now. I did want to ask you that because you spoke to the Executive Board and gave an update, and you've got the IOC session tonight where you'll give more information. Can you tell us a little bit about what's involved and where things are at? Well,
first we had to work with the international federations, those that hadn't completed their qualifications, such as rowing. There's a few more to go there, to come up with alternatives to complete the qualification process, but honour all the places that have been already awarded. So that was a big job. 33 federations. Then with the organising committee, we had there are 42 Olympic venues. And they will, to the IOC session tonight, announce that they have managed to secure them all 1 year later. It might sound easy, but they're all under different ownership or control. That includes also an Olympic village, which is being constructed by a consortia of 11 different companies. And they were to take delivery, they were to on-sell the apartments on a certain date, so we've had to negotiate with them to make sure that the Olympic Village is going to be available. Then another major issue was the site for the main broadcasting centre and the press centre. That's an exhibition centre in Tokyo, a big site exhibition centre. Now they've got bookings next year. So but we've already laid $70 million of wiring over 8 months. We've got 1,500 people there at the moment, the Olympic Broadcasting Services. So we didn't want to have to pull that up or start again. We didn't want to go elsewhere. So negotiations had to take place with them to make that available, and they had bookings next year. Then you've got the hotel rooms. 45,000 rooms were all booked for this year, but not for next year. 10% penalty if you don't fulfil that. So we've had to, and are still in the process of, sliding that by 1 year, and but we don't expect that all of our stakeholders will want the same number of rooms. The broadcasters won't take as many people, some of the National Olympic Committees mightn't, with the uncertainty as to what form the Games will take. So that's still taking place. Then you've got the worldwide sponsors of the Games. We had to move their rights extended by 1 year. Then there were discussions with them as to when the payments for those rights would be paid. We're talking a lot of money here. Then the rights holder broadcasters, NBC alone paid $2.4 billion US just for America for a games. And so normally the last few payments are contemporaneously with the holding of the games. So that's postponed. Then the IOC provides funding for the international federations. In the case of FISA, it's about 85-90% of their total income. They get an amount from us at the completion of the games. Well, they had a cash flow problem, and so we've had to advance money to them. So then there's 97 sponsors in Japan again. So it's been very, very complex and still ongoing, but we're fortunate with the Tokyo Organising Committee that they are a very professional organisation. They've still got 3,500 people working on this, which builds up to around 70,000 with volunteers at a games time. So we've been working with them. There's a joint steering committee of myself and their organising committee president, who's a former Prime Minister. We have at the table representatives of the central government, of the Tokyo municipal government, and we're just working through all of those things. As now we don't know where the pandemic's going to be at next year, so we have to prepare on the basis that the games are going to go ahead, and we're assuming there won't be a vaccine, but we have to then start talking at some stage later this year, when it's clearer, or early next year. We'll have to start making arrangements on the entry of athletes into the country, whether they'll have to be quarantined, border regulations, all of those things, health and those things. We work hand in glove with the World Health Organization. They've been advising us all the way. But this isn't just Australia participating. There's 206 National Olympic Committees, plus the refugee team, and they're all coming from, at this stage, countries who are at different stages of the pandemics, at different stages in those countries. So it's going to be something that we won't fully understand until later in the year, but we have to prepare now all the possible scenarios to cater for whatever contingency.
It's just absolutely extraordinary, and we've heard a bit about the cost to the IOC and assisting Tokyo in the postponement costs. I think it's around 800 million that we've seen, and the Olympic Foundation putting some money up as well. So it is just an extraordinary effort. But as you say, this is really like the words of our listener that asked the question, a global beacon of hope, a global unifying moment in history. And the Olympic Games always take place in the context of the global situation at any moment in time, don't they? So, this is just the current situation that we're dealing with.
Yeah, look, this is 40 years since the Moscow Games, where we had a boycott to deal with, and not every country came. But these, we've never had a postponed Games to deal with before. Games have been cancelled because of war. But this is all new territory.
Absolutely. Well, we wish you all the very best, and we really do look forward to seeing all of our athletes around the world hopefully competing in Tokyo next year.
Yeah. That's the bottom line. It would have been so easy to cancel these games, so easy for the IOC, the Japanese. You've mentioned what the IOC is spending. You can imagine what the Japanese are going to have to spend to push some of those contracts out a year. But at the end of the day, athletes get one chance every 4 years. In this case, it'll be 5 years. They have their dreams to pursue, and that's our primary. We have to make sure that every participant, athletes and every participant, is safe. But the imperative for us is for the Games to go ahead and not deny a generation of athletes the opportunity to participate in the Olympic Games.
Absolutely. Now, John, I would like to go back to where it all began for you. You were the captain of your school's rowing team. How did you actually get involved in the sport of rowing? Because I hear that you were quite an avid cricketer.
I was a cricketer, but I played cricket in the club with Alan Davidson, the legend. He was our president, and I played with his kids, but he said that you're never going to be a test cricketer, and at age 11 he said, why don't you send the scores in on a Sunday night? So I still played cricket, but then I went to a high school, Homebush High, and so our school was a rowing school, and I got involved there, and we rowed out of a club called Leichhardt Rowing Club, and on the Iron Cove, and there was an athletics carnival one day, and we said, well, look, we'll go down and train, but it was too rough on the Iron Cove, as often is the case, and so someone went up and got a couple of slabs of beer, and someone got some bread, and came back, and we got sprung, and we were by the captain of the club. There was now the president, Barry Moynihan, who you'd know, and he was a bit keen to get rid of us, and so we were kicked out of that club, and we were sent to Sydney Rowing Club. Now, in the process, we all got 6 cuts of the cane publicly at school, but I'll go on a bit further. Every time after that, Barry would see me at a regatta and my kids rowing. He'd say, oh, John Cates must be a little proud of little Fiona or Paul or whatever. And then I told this story in some interview, and he said, he was on the commentating up at Penrith, he said, if John Coates is here today, you were never kicked out of Leichhardt, and you owe us 35 years of fees. It was a very good comeback by Barry. But the fortuitous thing was that we were then taken in by Sydney Rowing Club, which was where the 1968 Olympic 8, which won a silver medal in Mexico, was preparing. And I was doing law, and Alan Grover was the coxswain, and Michael Morgan and other people like that. And sort of soon I found myself on the committee at Sydney as the honorary secretary, and they took me under their wing, and they then became the 72 Olympic 8. And by the time I'd outgrown coxing, obviously. I was doing some coaching and a little bit at your club too, Sydney University.
The right club?
Mine is the Premier Club.
I believe ours is the home of rowing.
That's a matter between my friend Mr. Boltby and I. But by 75, I managed the Australian team to Nottingham World Rowing Championships, and then 76 the Olympics, and then the Olympic people got hold of me, and that's the rest is history.
Yeah, and I was going to move on to that. You were the rowing section manager, as you say, in 1976, administration director 1980, deputy chef de mission 84, and then your first Olympics as chef de mission in 1988, and you went to 6 Olympics in that capacity. During this time, you were also involved with Rowing Australia, or what became Rowing Australia, and then ultimately became the president and the chairman. Was sports administration always a pathway you wanted to go down, or was it just something you sort of fell into and it just built? Oh,
look, I would have much preferred to be a great athlete, an Olympian, but I wasn't good enough. And so it's the path. And I guess if you're studying law, as I was, and then doing law, you get identified, and maybe you've got the smarts to handle the politics of it all. And so I did become the honorary secretary, then president of rowing, and for 10 years there, and probably one of the greatest, most enjoyable times I've had in sport. I was was responsible for bringing Reinhold Barchi to Australia in 79. It was clear to me after 75, 76 that we were just out of touch in everything. We didn't know how to rig a boat, some of our coaches, and so I identified and brought Reinhold out and managed that, and wasn't very popular across the rowing community. It changed everything, his concentration on small boats and creating competition in Australia, compulsory selection regattas. We had to row a small and a big boat. All of those things, well, that changed what had been the norm. You'd win a state championship, you'd win a King's Cup, and the same with the girls, and then you'd be the national team with 1 or 2 changes along the way. Well, didn't necessarily meant that you had the best 8 people in a large boat or whatever it was going to be. And there was just the concentration on the large boats. And Reinhold really was instrumental in changing that. And I was president during this time, and John Bolby was the honorary secretary. And basically he told us what to do. John was a barrister at the time. There was no office. I was running out of my legal office, John out of his barrister's office, and once a week we'd go round to his place. We had to get him a house, and we borrowed from wherever for that. We'd go round to his place and we'd sit down there, and first we'd be given the meatballs and he'd be telling us what had to happen. This is once a week. And then we'd think, oh, that's enough. And then we'd go in and there'd be the serving of the schnitzels and the German potato salad. And we'd get through that. But that was a situation where he totally directed John Bolby and I on what to do. He had the experience, and we changed Australian rowing at that time, I think, for the better. And the results started to come after that. And then along the way, we managed to have a professional administration, and they pensioned Bolby and I off.
Well, I mean, it is extraordinary, because really what you've described is the commencement of a system, of a systematic approach to Australian rowing, which didn't exist before that. So it is extraordinary. And we know, of course, that Reinhold, that the boathouse down in Canberra, the Men's National Training Centre, is now named the Reinhold Barchi National Training Centre in honour of the extraordinary contribution that he made to Australian rowing over decades. And I know that many of his athletes, just, talking to people like Jaime Fernandez and people who got Olympic medals after being coached by Reinhold and at the AIS, which has now become the National Training Centre. I mean, what he brought to Australian rowing, as you say, just shifted it into another stratosphere. So, I think we're all infinitely grateful, not only to Reinhold, but also to yourself and John for what you did in setting up Australian rowing.
I went on to the Institute of Sport Board in 86 as well, and that was when we got rowing in, and lasted there through to 98 or something. And I saw a lot of head coaches come and go, none with the longevity of Reinhold. From 79, he was either head coach or head of the AIS or advisor, through till he was still advising the team in 2004, which is a remarkable period. And as you say, what gives me great pleasure is the respect and appreciation that's still afforded him by particularly that 1986 8 that won the World Rowing Championships at Nottingham. And Jimmy Tompkins, Michael Mackay were in that, and Dale Caterson was the cox. They have their reunions most years, and he comes along, and it's a very tight group, but the respect that they still hold for him, I think evidences the contribution he made.
Absolutely. And now I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talking about the Olympics more broadly. From all of your Olympic experiences, which is many, many Olympic Games, is there one highlight or one moment that stands out in your memory?
Well, for a long time in rowing, it was the day at Banyoles when we won the 2 gold medals in 1992. The men's 4, and then Peter Anthony and Stephen Hawkins. And then there was Debbie Flintoff-King winning against all the odds in the 400 metres hurdles in 88 in Seoul, same day as Ben Johnson went positive. But for me, obviously, I was much involved in winning the Sydney Games and then running the Sydney Games. And I was the one who invited Catherine Freeman to light the flame, and that was the most significant memory that I have, and probably I rank it amongst the most important things I've ever done in my life. Michael Knight was the president. I was the senior vice president for the last 6 months of the Games. The board delegated full responsibility to run them to the two of us. We left it very late to decide who would carry the flame into the stadium, who would light the cauldron. We both agreed centenary of women, there'll all be women, the legends. Raylene pushed Betty, Pastor, Dawn, Shirley Strickland, Shane Gould, Debbie Flintoff-King. And then, though, when we had to decide on who would light the cauldron, and different to when a 16-year-old Ron Clark was selected to light the cauldron in Melbourne, we had some girls in our team who'd won a couple of gold medals, and without naming them, and so instead of just having a teenager identifying with the future, I felt strongly we should have someone who was significant. Kathy had won a silver, and she was the current world champion. So she was my idea, and Michael said, well, what if she's scared of fire? And because she had to step into the ring. So, and I said, well, how about you leave that to me? And I was going through to South America, and so I lined up to, and I knew Catherine. I'd been involved in her selection. I'd mediated her selection from 1990 at the Auckland Games, when as a 16-year-old she got her first gold medal. And I'd known and followed her. And so I arranged to take her out to dinner in Los Angeles in May 2000. And, oh yeah, what have I done wrong, sort of thing. And we went to this nice Italian restaurant, and then I put it on her and said, look, I'd like you to light the flame, light the cauldron, but, and I went through the reasons, and she said, why not Dawn Fraser, why not Sir Donald Bradman, and very importantly for me was the fact of she was Indigenous, and I'd seen how my own children, and there's many of them, she was just another Australian to them, and they'd go and watch her. And I thought, but that's not how it is with all Australians. And I thought then, and this was before we had a sorry in the government, and I thought this would be important in terms of reconciliation, indeed. So I explained that to her, but she'd said, why me? Then I said to her, look, but your number one priority is winning the 400 metres. And she looked at me and said, John, I love pressure. That's when I perform at my best. This was getting pretty emotional.
Yeah.
We talked it through, and I had an agreement from her that she would do it. And then husband was there, but when I walked her out to the taxi to say goodnight to her, she just sidled up to me and said, John, I'll understand if you change your mind. And the humility of that girl and that comment regularly brings me to tears when I remember it. And so, look, whatever else comes my way, or whatever else I've been involved in, that will forever be the most significant thing that I've been involved in the Olympic movement.
It's such an extraordinary story, and I'm actually feeling, I think for many Australians, the Sydney Olympics was such an incredible achievement, and obviously your role in that was, we wouldn't have had it without the role that you played, and it was such an incredible success and so galvanising for the nation. But you talk to anyone and they will tell you, most people that I speak to, one of the two things they remember was Cathy Freeman lighting the cauldron, or Cathy Freeman winning the 400. And it was just such an iconic moment in Australian sport. And to hear some of that background and how that came about, I think only really solidifies for anyone listening to this not only how critical it was, but how appropriate that choice was as well, and what an extraordinary Australian and athlete she was.
Yeah, a wonderful lady, and she still is. And
Yes.
I've had her appointed to the committee that's preparing our candidature for Queensland for Brisbane 2032. And she's a shy person. She doesn't like to promote herself in those words, and the agreement there was, well, only if you sit next to me at the meetings, John. But she comes from Queensland. Her foundation has done such a wonderful job up there with young Indigenous kids in northern Queensland and elsewhere. And she's was someone I wanted to have there, and I think she'll we'll have a further role to play with those games in advancing the cause of Indigenous people in Australian sport.
That's fantastic to hear. And talking about that 2032 Olympic bid in southeast Queensland, how are the preparations going for that, and what do you think our chances are of getting another Olympics here in Australia?
They're very good. The IOC has changed the way we do business. They have, and I chaired the committee that did this, it's called the New Norm, Agenda 2020. These days we realised that we had to simplify the games, we had to take the cost out of conducting the games. Otherwise we wouldn't have candidates lining up. And so these days you're encouraged to have a candidature that has existing venues and only build new venues if there is going to be a proper legacy for them afterwards. In the case of southeast Queensland, we have 85% of the venues there or planned. The planned ones are new community centres that can convert to sporting venues, such as they had it for the Commonwealth Games. And there was a community centre there which converted to indoor gymnastics. And a simple thing to do, but it reverts back to the community, and you might have 20 basketball courts in there or volleyball courts in between times. So existing or planned with the benefit of 2 Commonwealth Games, 1980 as well, and whatever else they've got up there, we're 85%. Then in terms of the operational cost of the Games, that's been reviewed first by the councils of southeast Queensland and then by the Queensland government, and both agree that the operational cost would be around $4.5 billion, 4.5 billion Australian, for both Olympic and Paralympic Games. And President Bark came out to Australia for Sport Accord, I think it was, on the Gold Coast, and he met with the Premier and he met with the Lord Mayor. And what wasn't understood is the IOC contributes. The IOC is contributing $1.7 billion US for the Games in Los Angeles, a bit less than that for Tokyo, and it goes up as our TV rights money goes up. So $2.5 billion towards 4.5. Then you have, as an organising committee, you have the income from national sponsors, and you have the income from the television ticket sales. So it will wash itself. It will cover itself, and it comes even before COVID-19. This was an opportunity for southeast Queensland, which is has got the largest rate of growth of the population anywhere in Australia. This was an opportunity for it, though, to catch up with much needed infrastructure in both rail and transport, and to connect Sunshine, Brisbane and Gold Coast, to better connect them, which is necessary. And now, of course, with the pandemic, we need jobs, we need growth, and all 3 levels of government support it. The Prime Minister supports it. I was in Osaka with Bark for a G20, and we met him, and he made it very clear that this was a priority for the national government. That was in May 2019. The South East Queensland councils had a feasibility study. They support it, and the Queensland government, it went through their cabinet late last year, so they all support it. Some very extensive studies and work has been done and submitted to the IOC, but we decided to put it on, and there's an Olympic candidature leadership group. The Prime Minister chairs, I'm the deputy, we've got the Premier and the Lord Mayor on it. But we decided the priority for everyone at this stage should be dealing with the pandemic, and so we've just put further meetings of that aside. But in the meantime, We have consultants who worked with us in Sydney, and they have been working with the international federations, FISA included, to finalise the best master plan. What's the best venues? Where we will have two Olympic villages. One will be Gold Coast, one will be in Brisbane. Where are they placed? What's the where are the venues most proximate to those, and those sort of things. And they've been to all of the international federations and the International Paralympic Committee, and the support is overwhelming from them. In the case of rowing, I think there's 4 potential venue sites up there, and a decision won't be taken on that until Svetla, who's the god of all these things, goddess, she will somehow have some input, and I think that FISA's given some indication, but that's to be finalised, and there's a few other sports to be finalised, this master plan. And we will then, when we're ready to go again after this, we will just elevate the dialogue with the IOC, and they would be in a position, they now have a commission that looks at this, and it would decide at some stage that they'd look at us, there's other cities that have put their hand up, they would determine is one of them ready to go, or 2, 3, and then make a recommendation to the IOC Executive Board, and they'd take it to a session for a vote. It has to be an election. It could be 22, probably more likely 23. A decision could be taken, and it's a very, very strong candidature.
Well, as a bona fide Queenslander, being born in Ipswich, I am very supportive of this bid and very excited, and to be talking about this 20 years on from such an extraordinary, games that we had in Sydney, and also the success of the Com Games at the Gold Coast in 2018. I think there's certainly an appetite and a readiness to see the Games come back to Australia.
By way of background too, one has to understand that the Games now ideally are to be held in July, August. Sydney was September, October. Melbourne was November, December. In 2004, the IOC said, if you're interested in bidding, that's when you should do it. That fits between the big tennis events. You've got to look at the French Open, you've got to look at Wimbledon, and you've got to look at the US Open. They're important. And it also fits in, to be quite frank, with that's the European television scheduling, but also the American college and school holidays. NBC did very poorly out of Sydney, and they prefer those dates, and it suits the European networks as well. And so it's that's why I wrote in 2015 to the Queenslanders and council mayor and the government and said, look, are you interested? We could do it in Sydney or Melbourne if it was at any time, if it was in summer, but there is an international calendar of events now, and there are other networks who, you just heard me explain how much their money pays for these games, and so it's for us to have it really is in Queensland, and not just in southeast Queensland. You can have preliminaries would be in Cairns and Townsville. The sailing people are very keen to get offshore racing, and that would be based around the Hamilton Island area, and it would be a wonderful promotion for Queensland. Plus, as well, a lot of countries come and train in the host city beforehand. I think we're starting to see more Australian teams preparing in Queensland in our winter as well. So it's good for sport, good for Queensland, and I think it would be very good for the Olympic movement. Absolutely.
Well, good luck and fight hard for us, because we are very excited about the prospect.
As I've explained, I'll be 82, and my dear Vice President friend from years, Peter Montgomery, a 4-time Olympic water polo player, he's agreed that he'll push me into the stadium in a wheelchair and they'll have some crane that'll lift me up, and I'll assume that they'll put me in the royal box, and I'll be up there watching it all, and Peter will be my manservant, and we'll manage to get by. But I'm looking forward to lasting that long.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked about some of the highlights of your career and some of the highest moments, and I'm wondering if from your career and involvement in the Olympics, has there been a toughest moment?
Well, the toughest was winning the Sydney Games. Melbourne had tried, Brisbane had tried, and we hadn't done very well with the African votes, and so I did 13 countries in Africa in 30 days with Gough and Margaret Whitlam, and we personal meetings with President Mandela and the head of state in every country, and that was key. We probably delivered out of the 13 African countries 6 votes. Melbourne would have got 1, Brisbane 1. So then the politics of the vote in those days, where IOC members visited you, but you needed to visit them more proximate to the time of the vote. They'd always come out here for a holiday in summer, and we had to visit them. I think I did 30 countries in 90 days leading into that vote. Rod McGee did something similar, different parts of the world. Phil Cole's the same. That was tough. And the last week, as the vote's unfolding, and I remember we had Paul Keating coming in from Paris, and he rang me and said, "Casey, do you really need me?" And I said, "Yes, we do." Because when the power brokers get together in that last week, we were losing votes there, and but we held on. We got there by 2 against China, which was against all odds. So that was tough. Running the Sydney Games with Michael Knight was both enjoyable and difficult. And you always have your controversy. We had the American marching bands, we had the ticketing scandal, and you got to have a broad-shouldered approach to some of those things, because you're going to be in the firing line. They were difficult, but that comes with the territory. And then, of course, what I'm doing now is difficult, intellectually stimulating at the same time.
Absolutely. A few things there to choose from. But later today, you're going to have the 136th IOC session, and as part of that, there will be 2 vice presidents elected, and you're set to be one of those upon ratification, I assume. So congratulations, and it's great to have you there at the top, and certainly advocating not only for Australian sport but for Olympic sport in that capacity, and leading, of course, the organisation towards Tokyo as well.
No, thank you. Well, there has to be an election, but as you say, there's 2 spots, and for some reason there's only 2 nominations. I've been a vice president before and been on the executive board, but you have to have a couple of years off, and I've had that. And this will be, I have an extension for till 2024, so this will coincide with the end of my term on the IOC, and so I look forward to continuing to serve in that capacity. It's that's very exciting at that level, because you are dealing with heads of state, and you're dealing with very big issues, and you're sitting at a table where a commercial lawyer from Sydney wouldn't normally sit, I can tell you that. And so I get a bit of a buzz out of that. I like meeting world leaders and those sorts of things, and so I find that very enjoyable.
Absolutely. Sounds like an incredible challenge, but also incredibly exciting as well. Now, John, we have a Fast Five, which I ask all of our guests on the show. It is a rowing bent, but feel free to answer as you will. So the first question is your favourite rowing course in the world?
Yeah, of the natural venues, I think Barrington and Lucerne. Lake Barrington, Lucerne. I think, I was the first international pitch I did was to win the rights for the 1990 at Lake Barrington. So that's always I was involved in the development of that and involved in Sydney. And man-made course, Sydney's stood the test of time. There's no doubt about that. And so they're my favourite courses.
Absolutely. I spoke to Jean-Christophe last week, and his favourites were Barrington and Lucerne as well, so popular choices. And this one, I'm not sure how many ergs you've done, but it's top track to erg to, or maybe your top song to work out to. Do you work out to music these days?
I'm a swimmer, but I guess if I had to have a song, it would be My Way by Frank Sinatra, which has always been my philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely, and a bit mellow for the erg maybe, but that can be a good thing too. Your best piece of advice that you've been given?
Yeah, when you get to the top, I guess, of any, whether in corporate life or in sports administration, surround yourself with people who are better than you. Make sure you've got a very good CEO and a very good board. Then getting there, you've got to be one step ahead in planning. And I think when you get there too, people expect you to be decisive and get off the fence. And I think so that'd be my advice.
Excellent advice. I'll try and take that on myself. Thank you. Your career highlight to date?
Kathy Freeman.
Absolutely. It's hard to go past that one. And maybe thinking back to your rowing days, and I'm sure it's not the time that you had 2 slabs of beer, but the hardest session that you've ever done, hardest training session?
I was a coxswain. I was too intelligent for that.
You didn't have to go for sweat runs or anything like that?
Oh, no, there's a little bit of that. We're talking back in the mid-60s, schoolboy rowing. And the most difficult, of course, we used to, when we were at Leichhardt, we used to steal the tub pairs, and we'd go out through underneath the harbour bridge, and we'd go out to Rose Bay, and we'd catch waves off the back of the ferries out there, and you'd do that in those days. And it was difficult one day for me because I came home with my complexion very, very red. So that I just have to say that I suffered there for weeks on end after that. But no, nothing that could compare to anything that our athletes endure. For me, 20 laps at Drummoyne is about the limit these days.
Oh, that sounds pretty good to me too. Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. I really appreciate your time and sharing some of the insights, particularly with the current global situation and the incredible task that you have ahead of you preparing for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics in 2021. So we wish you all the very best for that, and also, of course, for the Southeast Queensland bid for 2032. So I think I speak on behalf of a number of athletes and people in sport, and thank you for the extraordinary contribution that you have made, and it is without doubt that Australian sport and Australian Olympic sport would not be where it is without your contribution and pivotal role, and the same for Australian rowing as well. So it's been a complete buzz for me to talk to you, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
My very great pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity, Sarah.